have ever been to Africa or you know a little bit about Africa, you know that there are a lot of tribes and different languages there. Today, I will focus on one of these tribes, the Turkana. The Turkana live in Kenya, one of the 52 countries in Africa. Now, this is one of the biggest continents in the world, and Africa is home to more than 1,500 different languages. This causes a lot of linguistic problems. The Turkana have protected and preserved their language for many years. So, close to Kenya, you find Lake Turkana. And many years ago, the land around this lake was split into 3 different countries: Uganda, Sudan, and Kenya. Turkana land was integrated into Kenya. Now, before we take a look at how they have protected their language, it is important to know how these people live. So, the Turkana have a nomadic culture, meaning that they don't stay in one place but are constantly moving. They are also monotheistic and believe in the god Akush. Money is not important to these people because their wealth is estimated in livestock. One of the most known things about these people is that they are known as the warrior people. So the Turkana have protected their country for many years because of this image. The neighboring tribes and countries were very afraid of them, and their country was left alone. This was in their advantage because there was no pressure from other cultures and countries, and their language was left unchallenged. Now, what's so special about this group of people? So they live isolated, and because of this they have protected their language and their culture for many years. And although their lifestyle is very primitive, they are still very proud of it. Now today we will focus on how they have protected their language and their culture for such a long time, and why they wanted to protect it. Like I mentioned in the beginning, Turkana land is integrated in Kenya, and Kenya is a much more modern and developed country compared to Turkana land. Here you also find a lot of tribes and 69 different languages. All these tribes, including the Turkana, have to communicate with each other. But communication and social political cohesion is not possible if no one can understand each other, and it's impossible to have peace. So the government of Kenya introduced Swahili as the lingua franca. On the map you see the places where this language is spoken, and Kenya is part of it. Swahili has the function as a lingua franca, meaning that every tribe in Kenya had to know and speak this language in order to understand each other. This language is made up of a mix of Bantu dialects and Arabic, French, German, and English. Before the 1960s, it was an oral language and there was no script. But since the 1960s, the government also introduced the written script of this language. Originally, it was meant for trading, but is also used in education. Left, you see a chart with the most indigenous spoken language, and Swahili is the most spoken indigenous language in Africa with 98.3 million speakers. So this is a very important language. And at the right of your screen you see a table with English words and Swahili words. And English and Swahili are the 2 most important languages that are used and spoken in Kenya. And children have to learn this language, and they will also use it in education. To Turkana people, they also know a little bit Swahili, but they only use it for trading. So when a Turkana man wants to buy something from a non-Turkana man, he uses Swahili. They are not very good in Swahili, but they make it work. Now, how is it possible that Turkana can speak Swahili and know about this language if they don't get in touch with different cultures and countries. Now, all of this has to do with education in Kenya. Lately, there has been a rise of Turkana children going to school in Kenya. And in these schools, they only speak Swahili and English. There is no Turkana language. Now, this is a very big problem for the Turkana children because they will lose their mother tongue. They are pressured to learn Swahili and English, and every educational activity and instruction is made in these two languages. So in order to follow a proper education, you have to know Swahili and English. This puts the Turkana children in front of a dilemma, and they have to make a choice. The first one is they choose to stay in Turkana land. They don't go to school, they don't adapt modern society, they don't follow modern education. The advantage of this choice is that they will protect and preserve their language and their identity. The other choice that they can make is to do follow education and embrace it and adapt the modern lifestyle that they find in Kenya. The disadvantage is they will lose their cultural identity and they will forget about their mother tongue, the Turkana language. Surprisingly, a lot of people make the first choice, and this is also one of the reasons how they have protected the language for so many years. Now, how do the Turkana people handle the pressure of the modern society? Because we've seen that education only had so much pressure on them. Now, I've talked about the image as warrior people, that this image helped them to protect their country because they were left alone for a long time. Now, the other thing is education itself. Now, the Turkana language was an oral language, but it has also been made into a script, or the Turkana orthography. And a lot of missionary primary schools will introduce that children can learn the Turkana language script. It's not as modern as a Kenya education, and it's very cheap and simple. So the teacher has a chalk and a blackboard, and the children are sitting underneath a tree, and they have to write the letters and words into the sand, and that's how they learn their language. And the Turkana people want to make sure that their language lives on and every generation can speak it perfectly. The Turkana tribe is an example for many other tribes, although they have protected their language the best. Now, why is language so important to all these tribes, including the Turkana tribe? The first reason is that language gives them a sense of belonging. There isn't really a nation-state identity, and the tribes aren't really proud to be African and aren't really proud of their state, and they're proud of their own culture, their own language, and their own tribe. And the tribes, they all of them live in a specific place, but there aren't really borders that distinguishes them from the other countries and tribes. The language kind of forms a border between them and the other cultures and tribes, and language gives them a sense of belonging somewhere. So the Turkana language gives the Turkana people the sense of belonging somewhere, belonging to Turkana land. The second reason is the culture itself. So these tribes have a lot of songs, rituals, and have a rich mythology, and these would be impossible without language because they integrate a lot of language into these. Language is also important to transfer this culture from generation to generation, and doing this would be impossible without language. So the conclusion is that the Turkana do their best to protect their language and their identity, and are not willing to give up the primitive lifestyle and their country. There is still a lot of pressure of the education to adapt to other languages, which results in losing the own mother tongue. In this case, It was the Turkana children that lose their mother tongue because they follow education in Kenya. And language is very important for the African tribes, including the Turkana language. Thank you for listening.